Ukraine is gearing up for a tough winter ahead as Russia targets the country's key infrastructure sites.
President Zelensky says Russian missiles struck the Kherson region more than 250 times in just the past week. Meantime, Ukrainian officials say Russian forces fired on several regions in the south and east overnight, killing at least one civilian.
Let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Imtaiz Tyab, who is in southern Ukraine. Imtaiz, Ukraine, as you know, is bracing for more attacks on its energy infrastructure as winter sets in. So how is Ukraine preparing for the cold months ahead?
Elaine, Lana, good to talk to you. Well, the short answer is they're asking for help. A lot of it, and they're getting it. Of course, we've heard from the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who's in Romania, announcing $53 million in support. That support is going to come in the form of hardware, things like transformers and routers, even vehicles to go around the country to help reinforce and, frankly, rebuild a lot of this damaged infrastructure that Russia has been so ruthlessly attacking in recent weeks. That's on top of the $55 million that the U.S. has promised Ukraine as well, and that's going to pay for things like generators. And generators have become extraordinarily vital here in this country with so much of that infrastructure being damaged. And when that help is coming, it's also coming from other places as well, including from the European Union, which has announced that it'll be sending 20 what they've described as large-scale generators. And when they say large-scale, they mean it. One of those generators can power a hospital, just one of them. Wow. So Ukraine is receiving around 20 of those, 200 mid-scale generators. And so a lot of this support is coming, including from NATO as well, all of which is to ensure that Ukrainians do not suffer the kind of misery we've seen in other parts of the country already because that infrastructure is down, because there's no power, because there's no heating, and indeed affecting water as well. There's a huge mobilization to ensure that Russia doesn't weaponize winter, which is clearly what it's trying to do. Elaine, Lana.
Imtaiz, you mentioned NATO. They're reaffirming their promise to have Ukraine one day join the alliance. We know that that doesn't happen overnight. Usually it takes years. But what impact will this recommitment have on the ongoing conflict?
If I'm honest with you, not a lot. Russia is going to continue targeting this country much in the way they have been for the past 9 months or so. But it really does sort of put the spotlight on NATO and where NATO sits in this entire conflict, which is to say that we have to remember back in February, what was Vladimir Putin's pretext for this war? At least part of it. It was because NATO was getting too close to Russia's borders, which is essentially what it said. And so here we have this war. We're now entering the 10th month of this conflict. Ukraine's insistence, appeal, if you will, to join NATO, well, as you rightly point out, it's not going to happen overnight. But we have seen other countries which have had this position of neutrality join NATO, those countries being Finland and Sweden. And so if this has been, from the very beginning, Vladimir Putin's attempt to push NATO back, this 30-country bloc of countries, which includes the United States, Canada, Western European countries, Eastern European countries, from getting closer and closer to Russia's border, well, that has backfired spectacularly. But as you rightly point out, Volodymyr Zelensky making it very clear that his country wants to be part of NATO. But again, it's going to be very tricky for them. The concern for NATO is if they say, you know what, we are going to give this membership to Ukraine. What does that mean? It means NATO is at war with Russia. It means the United States is at war with Russia. Canada, those 30 countries. And that, of course, is something that many people don't want to see happen. We have to remember that Vladimir Putin, throughout this entire conflict, has dangled the threat of a nuclear attack. And the concern is that any kind of involvement of, or rather any kind of move for Ukraine formally into the NATO family, for lack of a better phrase, could trigger something as serious as that.
All right, Imtaiz, thank you so much. Take care.